Hello, my name is Orhan Kemal Cengiz. I'm a human rights lawyer and a columnist. I'm writing columns for a couple of newspapers. I'm waiting a photo to appear on this screen, actually. Anyway, I guess they will, yes. This is Mr. Tahir Elchi. He is the president of Diyarbakir Bar Association, which is the biggest city in this Kurdistan region of Turkey. He's a giant in the human rights field, in the human rights movement in Turkey. He was the voice of voiceless. He was the advocate of missing people, the people who were, who went forced disappearances, etc., etc. And he is a very close friend of mine. Unfortunately, he himself was killed on 28 November 2015. I would like to dedicate my speech to him and to his memory, to his legacy. I would like to come to the circumstances in which he was subjected. He turned into a kind of, he was demonized, and he, in a way, he was condemned to death, and he finally was killed. I will come to these circumstances, but first of all, I would like to start with our story, how I met with Tahir, and then what happened, what kind of things we did together, because I believe this is also a story of Turkey's human rights situation and the phases Turkey came through. I met with Tahir in 1997. We were following some cases before the European Court of Human Rights. Actually, I was helping him. I was working for an NGO which then helped Kurdish lawyers who brought cases before the European Court of Human Rights on behalf of Kurdish villagers whose villages were burnt down, the Kurds who were subjected to extrajudicial killings and so on. In the 90s, the situation of Kurds were terrible. It was unbelievable. And we were together following a case which is called Özkan and others. It was, I would like to little mention about this case. In a winter time, villagers were taken into custody in Ormanichi village, and they were forced to walk 7 kilometers in the snow, and then they were put in a construction building by the gendarmerie who took them into custody. But this construction had no window or no door. At the end, 15 days something later, they grieved gangrene. They lost their feet and they lost their legs. They even come to the European Court of Human Rights hearing, like this. I can't find the correct word right now. I met with Tahir during this case, and our friendship developed over the years. In 2007, he came to rescue me. I was following a case of 3 missioners who were killed by slitting their throats, because at that time, I mean, in 90s, military determined that the Kurds were the enemy. In 2000, the Christians, or religious minorities, were the enemy, and their last victim were these 3 missioners who were killed. As soon as I started to follow their case, I started to receive death threats, all sort of death threats. And Tahir Elçi, one of the first lawyers who ran to help me. I'm telling this story to show you that Turkey's past was also very bad. So, knowing this past, many liberals and human rights defenders like myself and like my friends, we supported pro-Islamist government, AKP, when they came to power in 2002. We believe that they will defeat the military guardianship in Turkey. We believe that they would bring democracy to Turkey. And for a while, this was true, actually. There was a process during which the power was disintegrating in Turkey. Freedom of expression was widening, etc. Our government was trying to approach the European Union. And we were happy, we were hopeful for, let's say, 4 or 5 years. Then the ruling party, and especially President Mr. Erdogan, started to gather all power in his hands, and he started to turn everything to their back positions. I mean, he started to exert a tremendous pressure over media, over freedom of expression. He started to change the ownership of media outlets. He started to get journalists fired. He started to sue the journalists. And this so-called liberal cases started from saying, for example, you are a corrupt guy or you are involved in corruption. If someone writes something like this about Erdogan, they started to sue them. Then came another stage in which they started to sue journalists who said Erdogan is a dictator or Erdogan is an autocrat. And now we came to a point, the prosecutors press charges if you say Erdogan is manipulating the political system, Erdogan is not Democrat, something. Even this kind of statements are enough in Turkey right now to be sued by president and then president lawyers and then the prosecutors. And the other issue, for a while we had hopes for the Kurdish peace process, which is started by Erdogan himself, because back then he believed peace process was working in his favor. Then he decided it was not working in his favor, but he needed the votes of the nationalists. So then we returned to full-scale war between the government forces and the PKK. And we witnessed that Turkey almost turned into the 90s. They started to impose curfews in the Kurdish cities, not in this time villages like it happened in 90s. They started to impose curfews. During these curfews, Kurdish citizens of Turkey are not allowed to go out, are not allowed to buy even a loaf of bread. They cannot take their wounded people to hospitals. Snipers killed so many civilians, but if you ask the government, they are carefully, separating terrorists from civilians, which is not true. And then, in terms of free debate about Kurdish question, we come to this point again, and we are coming my friend's story again. Tahir Elçi appeared on a television channel, let's say 1-2 months ago, before he killed. during the hot debate, he said something like this: PKK is not a terrorist organization. Actually, he also said PKK is using terrorist methods, but if you say PKK is a terrorist organization, you cannot understand what is going on the ground, because they have a very big support, etc., etc. Tahir Elçi and his bar association was trying to do what human rights defenders should always do. They criticized both the state security forces and the PKK for human rights violations they've been carrying out. But during this television program, he said something like this, because he was trying to force government and the PKK to come back to the peace table. And then, unfortunately, this one sentence was taken out of its context, and it was in all government-supported media, and he was presented as a kind of person who's defending violence, who is defending terrorism, etc., etc. And Tahir started to receive thousands and thousands death threats, and finally, on the 28th of November, he was giving a press conference before a historical monument, and he was inviting both parties to come back to the peace process. Meanwhile, two PKK militants came into the street, and the police officers were firing at this PKK militants, but then only one person died in this street, and he was Tahir Elçi, unfortunately. I believe we don't know exact circumstances, because we couldn't reach all cameras, all shootings of the event. But in the best scenario, I believe he was killed by one of the police officers who was under the influence of this government-supported media, which demonized Tahir Elçi. This is the best scenario. The worst scenario, everything was a setup to kill him and to silence him and to give a message to all nationalists that the government would not tolerate anyone who make PKK propaganda or something. Finally, I would like to say a few words about European reaction to what's going on in Turkey. I mean, in Turkey, there is no doubt we have an authoritarian government, and its authoritarian tendencies, unfortunately, have been stronger and stronger every passing day. A few weeks ago, a conversation leaked to the press, and this conversation between the President Erdogan and some authorities from the European Union. And it was a shameful conversation. We witnessed in these conversations the person from the European Union saying to Erdogan that they were delaying the European Commission because Erdogan was doing a lot to stop the refugees from coming from Turkey to come to European Union. European Union or any European country should never sacrifice human rights for the sake of stopping refugees at the borders of Turkey. And because we desperately need criticism, we desperately need decisions, reports, announcement from European institutions, from European countries, and no one should stop doing this for the sake of stopping refugees at the borders of Turkey. This is the end of my speech. I would like to show you a few minutes from the funeral of Tahir Elçi at the end of my speech. he was tens of thousands of people pay their tribute to him during his funeral, and I bowed in front of his memory here. Thank you very much.
Diyarbakır ortasında vurulmuş uzanırım. Ben bu kuşun sesini nerede olsa tanırım. Bu dağlarda gençliğim cayır cayır yanarken ay vurur gözü yaşıma. Ben gecede kalırım, ben gecede kalırım. Bu dağlarda gençliğim cayır cayır yanarken ay vurur gözü yaşıma. Ben gecede kalırım. Üzülme sen üzülme, başını eğme. Gün olur kavuşuruz, dert etme Diyarbakır. Ağlama sen ağlama, kanlı bezler bağlama. Bu yangın söner bir gün, ağlama Diyarbakır. Diyarbakır yolunda toz olmuş dağım. Bu hırçın depremlerle sarsılırım, kanarım.